And right now we're talking a case that right now the jury is still in deliberations on out in LA County, California. And this all ties back to social media.
Yes.
Yeah. A family of a young girl identified only as KGM in the documents is suing Meta and YouTube. And TikTok and Snapchat have both settled in this case, but Meta and YouTube are still kind of fighting it. But this all goes back to basically the mental impacts that this girl went through by being on social media, saying that she started using YouTube at age 6, Instagram at 9, and her early use of social media addicted her to the technology and made her social well-being or her mental well-being worse.
Yeah. And then just today we learned that there's a case in New Mexico that just got decided. A jury came with their verdict, and they found that Meta is liable in this case over child sexual exploitation on its platforms. And this is a $375 million lawsuit. So this is the judge reading the verdict actually in New Mexico.
So on question 1, did Meta violate the Unfair Practices Act by engaging in an unfair or deceptive trade practice? The jury answers yes. Question 2, did Meta act willfully by engaging in an unfair or deceptive trade practice? The answer is yes. Question 3, in accordance with the civil penalty instruction and the instructions as a whole, how many willful violations did Meta commit by engaging in an unfair or deceptive trade practice? The jury's answer is 37,500.
Now, in this case, Meta says they respectfully disagree and they plan to appeal. They also say that in that LA case that you were talking about. But the New Mexico State Attorney General's office, they are accusing Facebook and Instagram of becoming a breeding ground for abuse. And that's, it ties into that case in LA as well, just like the mental toll that being on social media at such a young age can take on users.
Right. And Ohio is doing some work to try and regulate that. And that's kind of currently also hung up in the courts. But right now, we want to talk more about this and the psychological impact of social media on children. And right now, we want to bring in Dr. Michael Flores, a psychologist with Nationwide Children's Hospital's behavioral health team. Dr. Flores, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So in your work, what have you heard are the big stressors for kids right now on social media?
I think it really depends on who you ask, to tell you the truth. I think if you ask parents, they're most concerned about bullying, cyberbullying, different things like that. But to be honest, I think for kids, what they're most concerned about is not knowing the next thing that's happening, missing out on information. There's this anxiety that's created by this hyperconnectivity with kids. They feel like they need to know the next trend. News travels really quickly, and so feeling like they don't know that next thing can create a lot of anxiety. But then that conflicts with their parents trying to restrict some of that access to social media as well too. So then you have this parent-child conflicts that often results, and that creates a lot more stress within the entire household as well too.
Is there really a good way for parents to try and navigate, walk that line of allowing their kid to partake in some of these things that they'd like, but also keep them protected and protect their mental well-being?
Yeah, I liken it to when you teach a child to drive. You don't just give them the car keys and expect them that they know what to do. You have to teach them the rules. You have to make sure that they understand safety. We don't necessarily do that with social media. We assume that kids know how to use it because they're really great with technology. This is the only thing that they've known. They grew up with the internet, but that's not always the case. And so just taking a step back as a parent and realizing that you have to teach your child about what is a safe person online, how do you know things might be dangerous, how do you restrict data sharing, how do you restrict your geo access, different things like that can be a great first step. But oftentimes parents don't know that they need to do that.
What's your recommendation? I mean, I've babysat kids that already have those iPads. They're like 3 on their iPads all the time. They're addicted to them. What guidance do you have for parents? Should they just dump the iPads altogether until their children are older, maybe like 8 years old and up? Or what? Because I feel like that is the starting point for everything, for them, even then being curious into social media, apps, all of that.
I think you have to think about what's the purpose of having the iPad there. Is the iPad there to babysit, or is the iPad there to teach the child something? For kids that young, it's more helpful to have the parent or the adult there to make sure to guide some of that discussion. Watching ABC Mouse or Sesame Street, that's very different than just watching some random thing on YouTube. But for kids that young, we want the parent to be there to help guide some of that learning, and not just to be like, all right, take this so I can cook something to eat for us.
Right. Absolutely. Do you feel like social media has become a breeding ground for abuse?
I do think it has the ability to do that, yes. And, we were talking about this case in LA and the case in New Mexico. And just this past December, Australia restricted social media for all kids 16 and younger, because of some of these big concerns as well. Again, kids don't always know who is safe, who isn't safe. And so they can be tricked into engaging in behavior with, people with malintent, for sure. It's really easy for that to happen, especially if they don't know how to navigate safely.
And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but for parents wanting to open that door of having that conversation with their kid about safety, how do you go down that road?
Yeah. So the first thing I tell parents is, don't have this conversation right after the child got into trouble. It's probably not the best time for any conversation. And so I say, wait for a calm time when you both are able to speak with a level mind. And I tell parents, there's so much information out there, and they get really anxious about what's the best tack to take. And so I developed this acronym called HUMAN. So I tell them, just be human. And what I mean by that is, H, you have to know when to seek help. If you see changes in their mood, their behavior, social relationships, academics, that's a time where you may need to get some outside help. And then U, to understand that your child may not like some of these restrictions, but it's something you have to do. So try not to take it personal. M, we want to model the behavior that we want to see. One of the best predictors of a child's social media or media use in general is their parents' social media and media use. And then A, we want them to ask their child, how does this make you feel when you're on social media? What are some of the things that you think? Who are the people that you're talking to? What are the apps that you're using? So just understand information, then make a plan based off of that information.
I love that. How does it make you feel? That's good.
Right. Yeah, that's not something we typically ask kids, right? How does that make you feel? It may make them feel great, or they may feel really upset, nervous, anxious every time that they use it as well, too. They may not even realize that at that time. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't ask, we don't know.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, and I like the model of that. How hard it is, even at our age, how hard it is to put the phone down.
Right,
sometimes.
And you know what? Yeah. Sometimes social media doesn't make me feel good. So
yeah.
It applies to everyone of all ages. Yeah. So, Dr. Flores, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Take care.